Hey everybody, how's it going? Your old pal JJ here for another video. Um, I'm always glad to see engagement on my videos. And part of the reason I've started doing these is because I really enjoy doing deep dives on gear. Talking about different things with different drummers and hearing experiences. I think it's very important. It's one thing to read an advertiser's literature about something. You'll never see any product where they'll ever list a fault or something with the product. It's only ever good. So getting real opinions on things is real unadulterated, and those opinions are pretty important, especially when they're not really colluded by or polluted by endorsements and all that kind of stuff. So the one thing with myself is that I don't have any endorsements with any companies. So the videos I've made previously where I'm talking about gear, these have it's all been things I've talking with other people, ideas I've come to myself, things I've taken chances on buying. Some things worked out great. Pasty Symbols, huge fan now, took a deep dive on them and it was totally worthwhile. Other things I bought through the years, not naming names, but just, everybody has that. You buy something and it's good, or it fails miserably and you sell it or whatever. But with some of these things, it's hard to get, especially if you don't have access to these items. It's very hard to get good opinions on things. And something that in my recent videos, I didn't have this item in my earlier videos, so it never got brought up. But I bought this item about we're in the year 2024, October 2024 right now is when I'm making this video. I bought the item I'm talking about somewhere around 2021, and if you know what I'm talking about, this item is particularly expensive, and the reviews of it are nothing but glowing. And that's the first sign to me that there's some treachery afoot, let's call it. Somebody's not being truthful, because there's no such thing as a perfect product. There always needs to be somebody somewhere that doesn't like it, so you can get the opposing opinion. And this item in particular was nothing but glowing reviews. And it's glowing reviews from the company, glowing reviews from the endorsers, glowing reviews on any video I could find on it, any blog, any Facebook post. It was nothing. And it to be honest, it sounded like a bit of blowing smoke up somebody's, you know what I mean? And so taking all that with a grain of salt, what I'm talking about here is, this is part of it right here. Some of you might recognize the green box, and you can't really see the, there you go. So if you know what these things are, you're already halfway there. But for those of you that don't know, I'm talking about Porter and Davies throne. And what this thing is a it's a monitoring system. So I don't know everyone's level here with live performance. I'm sure everyone that's watching these videos has performed live in some capacity, or whatever the case is. Everyone's got varying experience. And in my experience, I was lucky enough to be able to play some larger shows with some of the bands that I was in. And typically if you'd be in a club or something like that, you would be lucky in some of the places I was in, if you'd even have a stage monitor to get vocals at the very least. So most times for monitoring purposes, I would be literally stuck trying to listen to the stage, like the amps next to me. Hopefully I would get some vocal through the front of house or something like that, where I could at least, play the song with the rest of the band. And monitoring was always sketchy. Luckily, I got to a few larger scale shows, And what I would find at the larger scale shows, I think it's clearly, it's pretty obvious, the monitoring situation would be much better. You'll see me here, if you've watched any of my videos, you'll see that I wear, to play along with the cover songs, I wear headphones occasionally, but I also have in-ear monitors, and I use them for my work, and I use them for listening, and so I've started to use those for playing along to covers. But as far as playing in a band goes, and playing and performing live, I don't want to use them at all. The reason I don't bother using them is because I find them a bit too isolating in that environment. And I find it even more isolating, especially if you're using tracks or you're listening to a click track or something like that, which is something I don't do. I'm not smiting anybody that does, but it's not for me. It goes against kind of what I think the live show is supposed to be. It's fine to have a reference, but I'm a big fan of just like the natural ebb and flow of a band, of a performance, of a show. When you get into these situations where you're listening to a click and you're stuck with it, there's no movement. If the band does an arrangement change, things happen. People forget a part, they go into something early. Maybe they drop a half a bar or a half a beat or something like that, and then we're trying to get back on track, get back on the horse. And if I'm stuck listening to a click, I've got to adhere to the click. I cannot veer. And sometimes, in my opinion, either everyone needs to listen to the click or no one listens to a click. Just having your drummer listen to a click is like a handcuff in a live environment, if the band is set up in that capacity. If your whole show is sequenced and things like that, I mean, obviously a click track is paramount to have for the lights and for the show and stuff. But no bands I ever played in got to that level. We were, club bands and stuff like that. So getting back to the larger shows I played, I was lucky enough where I had exposure to large monitor rigs. And sometimes it would be, like a floor cabinet. It would be a, pretty good sized speaker, maybe like a 15-inch speaker. So I could get a tiny bit of, kick drum or some feedback. I didn't need the kick drum for monitoring, but what I liked was to have a little kick drum in there just to kind of get the size. Like it would make you feel like you're playing in an arena. Well, you're in a club, but it feels like an arena if the speaker's loud enough, Just a little feedback and, just not feedback, but I can hear the drum and it's just, it's giving me a little bit of that ambience and stuff like that when I'm behind the kit. And moving up from there, a couple of shows, more than a handful of shows that we played, I would actually get that monitor, which I could simply just run vocals through, which most of the time that was all I ever needed in a monitor anyway. I tended to focus mostly on vocals. The vocals are to me, it's like the leader of the song, and I was following them for cues and stuff like that. The guitars, I could always hear a little bit of the stage volume, so I'd be okay that way. But vocals to me were always very important to listen to. Pardon me. So vocals would be in the typical speaker, but a handful of times I was lucky enough to actually have a subwoofer system, which was amazing to have. And on one particular gig, I actually had a huge system, which was two 18-inch subs. And if you've ever stood next to an 18-inch subwoofer when it's firing, it moves a lot of air. And I had two of these off to my left, and then another speaker stacked on top of that. So essentially, a full PA system was my monitor system, and having that experience, it's like driving. I was on the Autobahn once and had a couple of times, actually, more than a few times, but on the Autobahn and had an amazing car, and driving 200-ish kilometers an hour, and when you'd come back to where I live in Canada, the speed limit on our highway is only 100 kilometers an hour, so it feels like a crawl. So playing with that monitor system, when I come back to that smaller floor wedge or no monitor at all, it felt anemic, and I greatly missed that. And so when I started putting my studio together here, I started like investigating more gear, and I try to keep my live setup fairly simple. I don't bring this drum set out, none of these cymbals. I have a whole other setup that's much simpler for live shows. It's just less gear to bring and all that kind of stuff, just easier. And so when I was setting up this, I thought to myself, it's like, well, I have an opportunity here to have, things at home I can use, and just remembering that experience I had with the large monitor system when I played drums, I thought that might be cool to replicate here at home and in my studio. I started investigating that a bit more, and by the time I really saw the costs and the setup that was involved, and it wasn't prohibitive exactly, but it was just a little overkill, I guess you could say. And so through the years, I've always had Modern Drummer. I've always read a lot about my favorite drummers, and I would always see a lot of these guys. They would have if you looked at their drum throne, and underneath you would see a speaker, or maybe even a couple of speakers sometimes. And when I found out what those were, I might have been maybe a teenager or my early 20s, something like that. And to me, it always just was like, a subwoofer needs a larger speaker, in my opinion, to really get what you're kind of after. You can put low frequencies through a small speaker, but you won't feel them. Feeling is where the low frequencies really come alive. You feel it in your stomach, you feel it in your butt, whatever you feel it. It's, you feel it in your teeth sometimes. It's so powerful. And so thinking about that, I started to kind of look more into those systems. And there was some commercially available systems quite a few years ago, I think. And they were called like a butt kicker or something like that. They had some applications for home theater, for gaming as well. It seemed like that item kind of not took off, but it was being used in those scenarios as well. And basically what it was a couple of smaller speakers with a fairly high powered amp, and basically it would just attach to your drum throne, whether it was through the metal portion or if it was actually installed directly underneath the throne. It would be screwed to the bottom of the throne, and the idea was that it would you would run a kick drum through it. That speaker would basically fire only the kick drum or other low frequencies, and butt kicker. It would kick your butt with those frequencies, and you'd be able to feel the bass drum. And that was the sentiment amongst most of the pros that I had read. A lot of people had gone away from using those large PA systems behind them, and they had gone to in-ear monitors by that point. And with in-ears, the first thing you're going to find that's lacking is low end. So to replace that missing low end that they normally had through these massive PA systems that they were monitoring with, that's where the butt kicker came into play. So you're seeing most of the pro drummers around, I started seeing it probably mid 90s, I think, is where I really started noticing those things underneath drummers' chairs. And always thought it was a really cool idea, but as I got further into, learning about electronics and audio, I would see that, most guys, the idea was great, but I think it left something to be desired because the speakers were just off-the-shelf speakers, more or less. They weren't purpose-built or designed. And there was a lot of, if things aren't mechanically coupled, you lose frequencies. So it's like, especially with low end, like very low frequencies, like sub frequencies, they need something to be like coupled to it, like, mechanically to transfer the vibration. So a lot of people would have them just under the drum throne, but the foam that's actually in the drum throne would impede the vibration. So you'd have to drive the speakers really loudly, and you'd have to have a very powerful amp to do that with. And if you didn't have the right speakers in place, you could fry your speakers just from sending that much power through them. Small speakers, tons of power to try to get the volume, and especially low frequencies, they require a ton of power to deliver properly. And so that ended up, so many people would burn out the amps, they would burn out the speakers, and sometimes it would happen mid-show and you would be without your bass monitor or whatever like that for half the show. And that was a barrier for me. Not that I was going to be driving them at high levels, but I just thought like there must be a better, a purpose-built kind of solution to this. And it wasn't too much longer. I would say probably, actually it was maybe about 10 years. I would say, I don't recall when I started seeing the Porter and Davies start popping up. It's very distinct with the green. And if you look now, you'll see so many drummers using them. But back when I was first introduced to them, it was just a small handful of guys. And it almost seemed to be like word of mouth sort of thing. Guys who were in the know. Like they had, experimented with every version of the butt kicker and they all failed, and then they went to this other thing. And again, with those pros that I saw using it, it was nothing but glowing reviews and just like, this will change your life and all these things that people say, and it's hardly ever true. And so I started to think more about the Porter and Davies, and so I investigated further, saw the price, and immediately said, not going to do this, and put it on the back burner for quite a while, like, at least probably 5-6 years, I would say. And so we get, and I'm playing, I've had my studio here, and I've had a studio previous to this, and I practiced there, and I just kind of lived with it. And the main reason I was even looking for it was because I don't trigger my kick drums at all. And I don't like listening to kick drums in ear monitors. I find it very distracting. And so trying to find a solution where I could monitor the drums and not have them super loud in my mix was what I was after. And so I just didn't have kick drums. I actually didn't monitor drums at all when I'd be here. I'm just listening to the kit as is. And I had developed my technique enough where, because I've never used triggers, I've never been listening to kick drums in an amplified setting, I had to kind of develop, so my bass drum, I play the bass drums quite loudly. And like, especially now, like I'm running the bass drums wide open with no muffling, so they're a little louder, and it helps me. It just sitting here at the kit with no microphones on, I can still clearly hear the bass drum, which is key for me. It helps me anchor everything in. And the issue I was running into was, if you're familiar with like fast heavy metal, and more extreme metal is different, but fast heavy metal is like, you get into these 16th notes on double bass drums, and you're at 170, 180, 200 beats per minute. It starts to be where, if you're at a certain tempo, you can get a lot of kickback. But at certain tempos, the beater starts going way, closer to the head, and way, way less stroke on the, the whole thing. So if you think of a double stroke roll, or, fast rolls on the snare drums, you're not doing full, 6-inch these when you're playing a 16th note roll at 180 beats per minute. You're much lower to the head. So we work a lot at, as drummers, we work a lot at, doing those fast things, but, being able to control the dynamics of it, whether it's a quieter roll or a louder roll. We work very hard at that, but the feet kind of get left behind in that scenario. We don't think of them in that way. So I started to work on where I would have those kind of dynamics with my double bass. And I looked at guys like, Dave Lombardo has been a big hero of mine for a very long time. And I think that guy he's there's guys that can play way faster than him and way more technical than him, but there's nobody better at 16th note double bass than Dave Lombardo. It has the best feel. He has so much power and so much volume at the tempos he can play at. It's kind of mind-boggling, actually. Like, his technique is off the charts, good and smooth and powerful. And there's a reason that everyone reveres him as like the like Angel of Death. Wasn't the first usage of double bass like that, but it's definitely probably outside of one from Metallica. Like, as far as double bass goes, that double bass drum break in the middle of the song couldn't be more famous in the heavy metal circles. So I looked to Dave, I saw what he was doing, and thought, well, I'll develop a similar, not as good, obviously, similar technique to him, where I'm playing acoustically, I get my volume up, and and then I don't have to worry about triggering that much to maintain the volume. Don't have to rely on microphones to get the volume I need. And I got that to a pretty good place. But once you get past, I started playing more extreme music, some of the more death metal and black metal and blast beats. I was very much into that stuff in my, my early to late 20s and even my early 30s. I still am, but I just play less of it now. And when you start getting into those fast tempos, I completely understand why everyone has to trigger their bass drums in that genre of music, because it's not possible. It's just not, like, you cannot hear it. It's the same thing as doing just like a not even a buzz roll. A buzz roll is discernible because buzz rolls don't happen over the top of a guitar that's 120 dB next to your head. Like, you need volume to cut over the music itself. So triggers come in very handy for that, and almost a necessity, I would say. I don't particularly happen to like triggers, and I didn't want to get into having to be reliant on them, having to go through, sourcing sounds and always having a module here and stuff. I just wanted to keep it as natural and, as to be able to use the drums in a wide variety of settings, basically. And so when I started to think about it from that aspect, where I'm getting into kind of more extreme levels of music, I started to think back towards the Porter and Davies. And if you're not familiar with what it does, it's very interesting. Working in audio, I was already familiar with, it's called bone conduction. And I ride bicycles as well, and there's it's called a jaw bone, and it's basically an earpiece, and it leaves your ear open. It's not an earplug or an earbud or anything like that. It leaves it open so you can hear environmental sounds while you're bicycling or running or doing whatever. But it sits on your jawbone right here. And there's a very cool principle, if you have, I couldn't tell you the specifics and the science around it, but this is the principle anyways, is that your bones will conduct sound as well. I mean, there are bones in your ears, the hammer, whatever they are. You look them up. I can't help you there, but you can look them up. It's all vibration. Sound is vibration, and you can hear sounds when they vibrate in your bones. And the whole principle behind bone conduction is that you put something on the bone itself. There's a very short line to get to your ear right here, and you can hear the sound. Now, you don't get like a ton of bass, because when you put an earbud in, obviously that is, an enclosed kind of loop. You're getting like not a true bass, but you're getting almost like a proximity effect bass, where it's extra bass that's induced just because of the isolation. So you can hear the music, but you don't get the bass, like really deep bass. It's there, but it's not, it's for a different purpose. It's for safety, not for sonic quality, let's say. So being familiar with that technology, when I looked further into the Porter and Davies, I realized instead of just a speaker that's firing up and relying on air pressure to transmit the sound or whatever the case is, the Porter and Davies is using the same idea as what the jawbone uses. And so as you sit on the throne, your sit bones and your spine is there, and there are bones that you're sitting on currently, and the speakers are placed in a certain fashion where they essentially line up with your sit bones, and those are able to transmit via the bone conduction, which was an amazing concept, because to get the the arena kind of ambience and that big bass sound, you had to have a lot of volume and a lot of air that was coming from here. And the issue with that is, that can feed back into microphones, and you create this loop of feedback potential. And it's just because of the volume, everything that's going on. And what the Porter and Davies does is it basically eliminates that issue. When I sat down with it for the first time, I'm lucky that on Facebook, I had a conversation with a pretty famous pro drummer who's an endorser. And luckily, I messaged him because it was a lot of money. And I was like, I just need to kind of know if it's legit or not. And he assured me that he had tried everything under the sun, every iteration of drum monitoring, and before he was an endorser of Porter and Davies, he bought some himself on word of mouth and was convinced, and purchased 3 or 4 with his own money before he ever became an endorser. And to me, that's a sign that the company's telling the truth, and he is also. So I took him at his word, and I put the money down and had it shipped from England to home. And the first thing I did, I'd read that I have a V-drum set as well, and put headphones on, and sometimes find it a little lacking. It's not exactly inspiring to play those sometimes. And so I'd hooked the Porter and Davies up. Didn't test it in any other fashion. Literally just took the throne off at the V-drum kit, put that one on, hooked it up, fired it so that only the bass drum was being sent to it. So I wasn't getting rack toms, I wasn't getting the snare drum all coming back through the throne. It was literally just the bass drum. And the very first bass drum hit was almost an immediate replication of when I had that huge monitor system. And no one else in the room could hear it. It was incredible. It was like I completely understood, and even just in that momentary testing, I saw kind of what everybody was talking about and the benefit that something like that could yield. My intention was to never use it live. It's way too expensive to bring out to my local bar. Initially I thought maybe I would, but when I designated it for home use only, I played with it on the V drums for a little while, and then immediately swapped it out for the throne that I had and put it on my acoustic kit. And through reading through people's different setups and how they utilize it, some people like to have just the kick drum coming through, so that's all you feel. Other people like to have a mix of the entire drum kit, so they'll have a cutoff point for frequencies. So there's no sense in sending your cymbals to this low frequency emitting device, because what's the point? But they would put like a cutoff point on rack toms. Like, the high frequencies wouldn't go through, but the lower frequencies from rack toms would come through. So you'd basically be able to feel the drums. And yeah, I mean, like the only kind of, similar thing I could say is like if you sat on a large subwoofer, like a very, very powerful subwoofer, if you sat on it and had that mechanical coupling between your body and speaker cabinet and all that stuff, you could get a similar sense of what the throne is capable of doing. The difference is that the discernible level to everyone else standing around, I have mine, it's enough to, you have to be careful when you're dialing this thing. Not careful, it's not dangerous, but I actually induced motion sickness one time from sitting on this, and I had it, I had it too loud. And I went into like some double bass like parts or whatever, and it was so overwhelming that it caused my eyes to kind of shake and vibrate a little bit. Similar as if you're standing next to a very large subwoofer and how those frequencies mess with your equilibrium and stuff like that. I was getting that, and that was when this thing was turned up to maybe, I don't know, 60%. I keep it somewhere around 25 to 30% volume, so it's not loud. I mean, these are speakers, and if I was to run, a song through it, you would hear it through here. But it's not. When you sit on it, that's when the sound kind of comes in, and it's crazy to me that you can sit on this thing, and through your bones, I mean, you can hear the song. The other cool part with what this is that it's not technically just a low frequency emitting device. You can set it up like that, but like you can send other instruments. There are people who want the mix of the drums. There are drummers who use this, and they actually send bass guitar through this as well. And I mean, getting into the audio side of things, for me, the less low frequency devices that are in your in-ear monitor mix, the clearer you can have like your vocals or your click track or things like that. I find the low frequency devices are really the ones that muddy up the in-ear mix and make it gets kind of overwhelming, and it's harder for me to follow. So moving the low frequency devices from your in-ear mix down to this thing clears everything up. It's just like they're separated elements. Said it's not even like you're technically hearing this, you're feeling it. Getting back to the other point I was making with the sonic principles of this is that it is a speaker at the end of the day, and it's not just like an impact thing. It's actually, you can feel the tone, it's a weird feeling. It's very hard to describe, but you can. And the experiment I did to kind of play with that was, swapping muffling, swapping heads, dynamics, playing very gently, playing very loudly. The great thing with the Porter and Davies is that it responds to all of those things. You can hear the difference when you're sitting on the throne, when you adjust the muffling or something like that, because it's using a microphone to send the signal to the throne. So what the microphone picks up is what you're sending back essentially to the throne. Now you can EQ it on your mixer and do all that kind of stuff to eliminate it. But it's cool to have that. It's more than just a thumper. It's not thumping you. It's more musical than that. It's more nuanced than that. So you can feel the dynamics. So in regards to my playing, not only did it help me immensely in making faster double bass more accurate, because I could feel it instead of relying on hearing it. A live setting, if you're not playing as loudly, you can have the microphone will help you out, obviously. And but here it's like the Porter and Davies is what makes the difference. I can feel the bass drums. I'm not relying on hearing them. It's all tactile, and so it's a different it's a different feeling altogether. Sitting on this thing and playing always makes me just go back to that moment where I was like rock star, and the big PA monitor setup. It's almost an exact replication of that, and so if you've been lucky enough to ever experience that at that level, if you don't want to have that at home, this is a very easy, albeit expensive, but a convenient way to mimic that without killing your ears and disturbing your neighbors with volume and all that kind of stuff, rattling windows, or glass or whatever. It helps keeps things kind of dialed in and quieter in this area. It's not affecting my microphones. It's not affecting my recordings, but it feels like it should be. That's how prominent the bass drums are now because of this thing. And it's amazing. Like it's been it's very hard to go back and play drums without it. Once you experience something like that, it's we all get to those places. I think it's like when you have certain experiences with equipment that is a game changer. It's disappointing. It's all these things. You know, you feel like you're dropping down a level when you go back and sit on a normal drum throne after sitting on this thing for a while. And but yeah, once again, you know, these aren't. I'm not endorsed by anybody, and these are all things I've purchased with my own money, and I've gone through the same things that, you know, you're probably analyzing too. It's so much money, you know, it's a lot of risk. There's not really a huge secondary market, so if you don't like it, I mean, you're gonna take a hit returning this thing, you know, all the way to England and stuff like that. And you know, I just decided to forego all that rational thought and drop a bunch of money on, you know, essentially what I thought could be a gimmick. And it's the furthest thing from a gimmick. I've bought a lot of things that are gimmicky, and you know, they aren't even advertised as such, but they end up being that. You know, certain things for cymbal sustain and all that kind of stuff. It's I didn't get what everyone was raving about. It just didn't happen. So whether, you know, it's a bit of a fabrication or a bit of an elaboration, you know, that kind of thing is very likely. But I had suspicions that the Porter and Davies would be that, and I was very, very pleasantly and very happily surprised that that wasn't the case. If anything, I would say my expectation that it would be, you know, maybe a thumper, like just an impact, like there would be no tonal element to it or anything like that. Literally just a thump in your butt bones so you could feel it or whatever. But it's actually it's an additional kind of like musical element. It responds to microphones. It responds to anything. Like it's such a cool addition to the kit. And if you are at a level, you know, where you can afford to get something like this, it really is like, it makes playing the drums more fun, in my opinion. It just, everywhere, any scenario you're sitting in can feel like, you know, you're at an arena rock show with one of these things, which is pretty cool. And, you know, it helps in many ways, you know, being able to accurately feel, and, you know, we always talk about feel in drums, you know, things feel good and stuff like that. And it's, you know, as an actual feeling in your body, you know, sometimes like maybe some more experienced drummers, you'd be able to relate where, you know, you're playing a snare drum and you're getting really good rim shots and it feels good. Like you're in the pocket, it feels good. This thing adds to that experience and like immensely. The benefit to my playing has been quite noticeable. Double bass accuracy has gone up. And just, you know, yeah, just as a monitoring tool and a practice tool. You know, bass drums can get a bit like muddy just because of the, you know, like if they're playing fast, it's just a lot of air and stuff, and you're not relying on this overwhelming monitor mix. You're hearing, you can hear the impact, you can hear a little bit of the tonality if you want it. But yeah, it makes the playing experience so much more pleasurable. And I know there are some different like iterations of this. I think butt kicker might still be around. You know, I haven't actually experienced one, but I don't know after having this if a butt kicker could even come close. This is purpose built. The amp is purposely built for this. It's not a car stereo amp or something like that. The version I got comes in a Rode case as well. When I looked at some of the butt kicker amps, I mean, we were looking at amplifiers that could do, you know, 800 watt. I'm not talking even like the RMS, like a peak. I'm talking like a sustained 600 watts, 800, like huge power draws. And the power was to get the volume so they would be loud enough where you could hear it over a drum set. And I'm especially an especially loud player. So I figured that would probably be something I'd be battling a little bit. And not having the mechanical coupling between the speaker and the drum throne itself, you're already probably losing, I don't know, 30% of the experience that way. And to make up that experience, you've got to power. That's how you get over, you know, a lack of that mechanical coupling. Increased power, increased heat, increased wear and tear just from, you know, driving speakers at that level. I'm able to drive this at a very low level. That thing never gets hot. It runs for hours. I keep it going. Every time I sit down to play, it's on for a handful of hours. And just, you know, it's always performing to the same level. It's, you know, there's nothing ever strange about it or anything like that. And, you know, it being all one unit, the amp is purpose-built, the throne is purpose-built. There's different thrones available. The top of the one I got, you can kind of see it. It's, you know, it's a velvet top. It's an oversized throne as well, which is kind of nice. But it's very similar to like a rock and sock throne in its feeling. My original Tama throne was kind of like a saddle, not a tractor seat, but like, you know, a saddle seat. And it was pretty stiff, and it would be, you know, not uncomfortable, but I would start to feel it after about an hour of sitting on it. And, you know, this one has stability, but it has a cushion on it as well. You can kind of hear it. I wonder if anyone else's Porter and Davies makes that noise. If you have one, chime in and let me know, because that's the only thing I can't find out and haven't discovered, is if it's just mine that makes that noise. It's the air and the, you know, there's a cushion in there to, you know, not make it feel like you're sitting on a plank or whatever, but it makes that noise. I haven't heard it in any recordings yet, except these ones where I'm just talking to camera, so it always cracks me up when I hear it. But yeah, once again, you know, no endorsement. This is me, you know, buying stuff, experimenting. If it was bad, I would tell you. There's no reason for me not to. And I've yet to discover anything that's bad about it. I've yet to discover anything that would be a negative towards like a playing or development tools or anything like that. It's not going to damage your hearing. You're not going to get injured. You know, you're not going to go flying to the moon from overpowering it or turning it up too loud or whatever. But yeah, I you know, I can't recommend these things highly enough. And expensive, yes, but when you get to a certain level maybe in your playing, and you know, you want a more I don't know, a nuanced experience, or you just want to have a bit more pleasure while you're practicing and things like that, it's very nice to have cool products like this stuff available. And you know, it's available to normal guys like me, and it's not just for the pros. And you know, there are I think Porter and Davies is doing it's not like inferior or cheaper. I think it's just it's has less it's a couple less features that you may not need if you know, you're just keeping it at home or something like that. You can save a few bucks on it. But so yeah, I hope if you came to this video to get some information, I hope I helped you out. And if you're on the fence about it, I'd tell you that I was in the exact same place as you, very much on the fence for a long time, and someone helped me, and I hope that this video might help you if you are on the fence as well. And I think if you're to make the plunge and get one of these things, I don't know if you'll be able to go back to regular drum thrones. So be warned, and don't let your friends try it, because they'll probably want to borrow it from you and maybe not give it back. So this has been the one about the Porter and Davies drum throne. Cheers.